This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and Upsnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to Transformations with Tara Sutphen. Tara Sutphen is the author of Blame It on Your Past Lives, Soul Agreements, and The Abenda Chronicles. Grammy-nominated audios, videos, and MP3 series. You can find these MP3 series now at TaraInsight.com.
Welcome to Transformations with Tara. This is Tara Sutphen. And my guest today, well, my co-host is Jason D McKean, and you know he has over 1 million records sold of Om records, and has a big line of meditations and other Om records as well. Thank you, Jason, for being on the show today.
Thank you, Tara.
My talk radio guest is Dr. Joanna Massey, and she is the new author of Shock, Surviving 5 Generations in One Workplace. And she's also had a lot of other books as well. So we can talk about those as we go along. But thank you, Joanna, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah. So it's really interesting that you're very observant, I noticed in your work, and I really love it. You're talking about the culture transformation, all the crisis communications, and how the workplace is 5 generations now. The kids, 18-year-olds up to 80, and I would say 85, people are working. The whole world is working. And today, I think it's really great that you're on the show because, you probably have some insight on what the world may be doing and how we can help ourselves change a better, mental state as we go through these changes. Because, just knowing that, people are still working at 80, are we all going to be working at 80? I know that my mother, a couple of years ago, she's in her 80s and she's an RN. She's a registered nurse. She's a really quite a high-end registered nurse. And she was working in her 70s, and she decided, I want to put out my resume and see if I could get a job in my 80s, And she did. Within the hour, she got 3 responses on like a nursing, applying in a nursing setting of some kind for jobs. So it was really interesting to see, that, they still hire for, they're still hiring everywhere.
In the book, In Culture Shock, I say, there's people as young as 18 and as old as 80 in the workforce. I picked 80 because that was nice alliteration, 18 to 80, but you're absolutely right that there are people well into their 80s in the workforce, especially if you look at healthcare, for one, the example you just mentioned. Finance is another area. Hollywood is another area. There are the executive jobs where, yes, obviously there are certain positions where if you're doing heavy labor or other things like that, where the body can no longer support the work, then you're seeing retirement earlier in those areas. But in the executive positions where it has to do with the mind, and as long as your mind is still sharp and you're still able to carry out those positions, that people do it well into their 90s. There is at Berkshire Hathaway, Charlie Munger is the number 2 there, and he's 94 years old. And that is an extremely well-run company, a very well-respected company. Warren Buffett, who runs the company and started it, is 89, I believe. So,
Oh. Wow. And I wonder, is it a certain, do we have like a certain enzyme that we put off, or, that our brains, our minds, our bodies put off to, help us maybe really have that cognitive thought and conceptual ideas really at that time. What do you think?
It's very individualized, and I think in a very broad way of looking at it, the reality is that we are living healthier and we're living longer. So this concept of retirement at the age of 65, that had to do with a period when we were dying younger, when human beings died younger. And also where I remember my grandmother in her now that I realize how old she was, when I was a child, she was in her 50s. She looked like a grandma, with gray hair and a very traditional sort of Norman Rockwell-esque image of a grandmother. My mother is almost 80. She looks the same as she looked when she was in her 50s and 60s. She still dresses, and like she's going to the office, although she retired at the age of 77 from the financial industry. So we're just, there's a saying that I talk about in Culture Shock, 50 is the new 30. And that, that meaning that when you get to 50, your brain has gotten to a point where it's matured and you feel a lot more comfortable in your skin. Oh, I got this life thing down, like things are gelling a little bit, and yet at the same time, we still have the energy and we want to keep going like a 30-year-old does. It didn't used to be that way. So that shifted. And as a result, people are staying in the workforce longer because they get satisfaction out of it.
Yeah, I think sometimes it helps move your brain if you're learning new things and you're using your brain.
Without a doubt, they say
our process,
Without a doubt. They say if you can learn a second language or a new language after the age of 40, that you will extend your brain's life, that being able to do things like that, going back to school, getting another degree, learning new things to help the synapses connect in different ways after 40 is important and helpful.
What is the,
I really believe that.
Well, what's the shock part of, like in your title, Culture Shock? Is it that you're still having to work at 80? Is that like you wake up and you go, ah?
The culture shock part of the title, there is a subtitle of the book. My fault for not mentioning it, but it's called Culture Shock and then : Surviving 5 Generations in One Workplace. Because the concept is that all of a sudden we have everything from Generation Z and Millennial to Gen X, baby boomers, and the silent generation. We've never had 5 generations in the workplace. And the way an 18-year-old, a Gen Zer, sees the world, and the way an 80-year-old who's a silent generation person sees the world, very different. And it's causing a lot of miscommunications, a lot of misunderstandings. There are a lot of shifts happening that to the younger generations, their thought is, why aren't we doing things this way? It's so obvious. And to the older generations, it's like, why are you trying to change everything? We've done it this way for decades and it's worked fine. So there's this whole push-pull that's happening. And my work, I run a company and we help corporate clients. We work primarily with corporations. We help them improve their business results. And we do it by using neuroscience as the foundation of everything. And then adding communications tools into it. Because that saying sports is 90% mental and 10% ability. Business is the same. It's no different. And so we handle very traditional functions. We do marketing communications. We do executive training. We help business executives write books and publish them. But we do it in a really non-traditional way because we're looking at the neuroscience. Everything is founded in neuroscience. So how do human beings respond to stress? How do they resist change? And then building the programs and the products from that perspective in order to help people be more influential and be more innovative and be, for better actions, for better outcomes, for better business outcomes.
So what's the basis of the, like, let's say you have, 2 generations there that are not communicating. They're seeing their realities in different ways. They're approaching their work in different ways. So what's the basis then of starting to build that bridge between the two?
So interestingly, I have, which Tara referred to, I have another book I wrote called Communicating During a Crisis and How to Influence Others. And in that book, I really lay out, one, I talk about the neuroscience because I always start with that because it's really important, which goes to step one of your question, understanding where somebody else is coming from, and also understanding your own reactions to change and why we resist it, because we are hardwired to resist change. We're built that way as human beings. It's a survival mechanism. And then the second thing, so as first is understanding where somebody else is coming from, relating to that person. You might not agree with them, but you can relate to them as in, oh, I understand what you're saying, or I've experienced that, or I can see that point of view. And then informing them and empowering them. All of this done, I should probably do this using a specific example because it feels very theoretical up here right now, and I'd like to dial it down a little bit if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you do it all from the perspective of keeping everyone calm, right? If you look at Twitter, we're like lobbing these like shame bombs over the Twitter fence, and people get defensive and they get angry, and then there's just like it's like we're building walls, like block after block after block start to go up. And what I try to do in business communications is teach people when you can keep things calm, right? When you can keep it level, you stop the fight, flight, or freeze system from kicking in. And so I'm going to use an example, and then I'll explain it in a little more detail. At the beginning of COVID, New York's governor, Andrew Cuomo, New York State was the hardest hit. Andrew Cuomo held a daily briefing. Love him or hate him, whatever. Cuomo did something really well in the beginning. He was transparent about what was happening, right? He was talked about everything that was going on, everything he was dealing with, about all the conversations he was having, whether it was with the president, with the federal government, with the companies trying to secure PP&E, all this kind of stuff he was doing. Right. He was truthful about it. He told us everything, right? Transparent, truthful, and he did it daily. He held a daily press briefing. So it was really timely. Like we felt like we were on the ride with him. And then more importantly, he was really calm. He was real calm about his delivery, very matter of fact, very factual. He was confident. He's like, we're going to get through this. I'm telling you, we're getting through this. We're just on a little bit of a bumpy road. And he was really compassionate. And he ended every briefing with his personal opinion. And he made it clear. He's like, I've just been talking to you about facts. This is my opinion. Just be clear. This is the way I see it. Just my opinion. And he'd say things like, we're New York tough and we're going to get through this. And I know this is hard. I don't get to see my mother right now. And he always says, I'm an Italian guy. I'm used to having big Sunday dinners. I don't get to see my mom. This is not natural. Like he showed us his humanity. Those were really important things for then setting us up to be influenced, because at a time where people were really stressed and a lot of fight, flight, and freeze kicking in, which is a brain reaction that we have under stress, he was able to sort of take that down a notch for people that would tune into him, that leveled us off and helped us. It empowered people like me who live in New York to make more rational decisions. So for example, let's just say I was a big proponent of mask wearing. I don't want to get this thing. Like, I don't have a problem with it. But I know a lot of people who don't want to wear a mask. They're libertarian. They believe in freedom. They're like, don't tell me what to do. And these are friends of mine, and so I can see both sides of it. And so, like one of my friends who was anti-mask, for example, I could look at that and say to her, I get it. We're heading into summer. It's hotter than hell. It's hard to breathe. I totally understand what you're saying. We were both relatively calm because Cuomo had explained to us the need for it. We didn't feel like we were being impinged upon. And then we were set up to be influenced. Now, did I change her mind about it? No. I mean, she wears it outside, but she still went to church without a mask on. That was, and by the way, got COVID, just FYI. But she still, now that she's recovered from it, was like, look, I made a decision knowing what I was doing. And that was the extent of it. That we can have that conversation from a calm place because I understand her. I don't agree. I'm not on that side of it, but I understand her, and I can say to her things like, so from my perspective, the reason why that's a problem is not because you got sick and you survived. That's good, and I'm glad you're okay, because I know it's very scary. But because if you had needed to go to a hospital or you had transmitted it, then the hospitals are getting overloaded. And when the hospital system gets overloaded, there's a whole bunch of other problems that happen. So for me, this is not only about me not getting it and my freedoms, it's about me helping out the system, the city as a whole, the state as a whole, which she understood. It didn't necessarily change her perspective. She kind of went, yeah, I guess I'm being a little selfish. I could see that, so my point is we're understanding each other's perspective because we're calm. We are relating. I don't want to wear a mask. I get that. It's a beautiful spring and summertime out at that point. And we're empowering each other by providing information calmly so that we can see it in a way where it can be processed by the brain in a non-defensive, logical, rational way. Which doesn't mean we're going to shift somebody, but it's way different than the thing that happens when we are, you're wrong and you should do this, and I'm pointing my finger and I'm blaming and I'm shaming.
Right. Being reactive.
Yeah.
Come on, Jace.
In a business setting, it's like it's up to the owner, the person who has the vision for the company, right? To have that overall view, right? That if you have someone who's 18, you have someone that's 80 years old, it's like where they're there to support that vision, right? They're there to do business, right? Both of their paychecks depend on them doing their jobs like effectively, right? And with that, it's like they have to, interact with each other and be on the same page so that they're like supporting the vision. So it is like when you go into a situation like that, or how you explain it, is it something that you're looking to take both of these different personalities and respect their where they're coming from, but get them to where they're not like, trying to like either one up each other there in the process of doing business, but to stay focused towards the larger goal?
It's such an excellent question. And I'll give you an example that I use in Culture Shock. And at some point I want to come up with a better example, but it's just such a juicy one. Let's say you're absolutely right. You've got, let's say it's a 22-year-old and a 75-year-old manager, entry level and an executive. And they are on a team with a 50-year-old. So that's going to be Gen X. All right. So you've got silent generation, Gen X, and Gen Z. The three of them are in a meeting and they're having a discussion about the procurement and use of paper because they're in the operations. Let's say it's the COO with one of their middle level managers and an entry level person. This seems like it would be a very non-confrontational thing, but what would help to understand is that the person who's in their 70s grew up during in the aftermath of a major war, grew up in the aftermath of the biggest recession that, the Depression era in the late 1930s, at where paper, when you had a birthday or when there was a holiday, you unwrapped your gift meticulously. Your mother ironed the wrapping paper and stored it meticulously and then reused it for the next birthday and the next holiday. And the boxes were the same. And the reason you did that is because they're literally, forget, you didn't have the money to buy it, but on top of not having the money, literally the supplies didn't exist. They weren't being produced. So you have a different attitude towards paper and boxes than the 50-year-old who grew up in Gen X, who grew up in the 1980s, where when they opened their presents, they tore it open. They threw everything, box, bow, and paper, into a giant plastic Hefty bag. Sorry, Hefty, I didn't mean to call you out, but I'm using that generically, right? A giant garbage bag with no real thought towards the use of it or the getting rid of it. To the Gen Zer who has true angst, like actual agita about the environment and the use of paper and how unnecessary boxes and paper are, and can't everything be in the cloud, and why do we have to use this at all? Imagine that conversation with all that background. That's what we bring into the workplace with us. And so if I can understand that, if I can sit there as a Gen Xer in the middle of those two people and witness, and by the way, I've been part of this type of conversation, which is why I use it as an example. The silent generation person saying, this is ridiculous. We're not getting rid of all the printers. Of course we have to have printers, and we still need every executive needs a printer in their office. They have to print stuff out. I want to see my reports on paper, and the Gen Z are being like, but look how much money we could save if we didn't order printers and we didn't service printers and we didn't have to buy the paper for it. I mean, you could do real stuff with this. I mean, and then they have a spreadsheet that shows you the massive amount of savings, and try to navigate that conversation and negotiate it. It helps if you understand where each person is coming from.
Right. Well, I still think that you need some paper. I'm definitely somebody who uses, technology to its highest. Every address I have, I send out files, meditation scripts, ideas. I'm somebody who definitely uses, the internet to the nth degree. Every thought that I have goes out as a something that I save. And just all my correspondence, even, I think I have, correspondence from like 1997, of emails that have come in from customers and stuff. But the thing is that, I do think that we can't trust forever that, I back it up on paper, all my scripts. I put them in those big binders. Because I don't trust someday that the internet will be there and that all my intellectual work has gone into the ethers. I'm not going to trust that because I don't trust it. I just don't trust it. So that's where I'm at with, I think, kind of in the middle ground of the 80-year-olds and the 18-year-olds. It's the trust factor. Maybe I've lived long enough to know that, well, things change. So
plus all the storage mediums.
We're definitely experiencing change now.
The storage mediums change too. It's like the floppy disks. It's like, oh yeah, I wrote a book and it's on a floppy disk, and it's like, or you put it onto CD or something, and it's like all these computers that now don't have CD players on them. It's like, how do you retrieve your stuff? I've got a bunch of thumb drives.
You have to go to the next level. I've done that with all the home movies. I have to put them in digital. And now it's finding them. Oh, well, if I could save it and I saved a lot of them on CD, they're backed up on hard drives. But now it's like, well, I put them up into the clouds. It's hard. It's rough, to think that we're, to trust on that level.
I think that's
I save all my
understandable.
VHS. Yeah, I've saved a couple VHS players. I do, to make sure that.
So Joanna, is that an example of exactly what the older generation is going to tell these young whippersnappers? It's like, hey, you can't trust it.
That is exactly it. And I was going to, when I said that's understandable, it's because of by the way, we're probably all relatively close in age to each other, and we have different experiences. We grew up in an analog era where there were like, 3 or 4 TV stations, and, you got your newspaper, you had your newspaper and your magazines and books and all this kind of stuff, and Gen Z is our first fully digital generation. They've never known a world that didn't have the internet or a cell phone. And so for them, it is a very different perspective. And I'll use an example, privacy. We all knew a world where there was privacy. And this concept that Alexis and Siri and all of these home devices are listening to me 24/7, that freaks me out. I will not have a home device. I won't do it because of what I know about how they train these home devices, and that they have to be on 24/7 listening to you, and that there's other human beings who hear that. And it's a very big brother to me. But younger kids, younger people who have not known a world where there was privacy, it actually is sort of the price of doing business for them. They're like, well, that's just the way it is. And they might not like it, but a lot of them accept it. And I've witnessed conversations where an older millennial, let's say somebody who's 37, 38 years old, was born in the early 1980s, is having a conversation with a younger Gen Zer, let's say they're a teenager now, trying to explain this concept of privacy where they literally don't, it's not in their world experience. And I agree with you that yes, stuff on the internet gets lost, stuff in the cloud gets corrupted and taken. I mean, there are all kinds of scary things about that we don't have to worry about with paper necessarily, although paper does get stolen. People used to break into people's houses and offices and stuff.
Yeah, it can disintegrate, and it's
Fire.
heavy to move around, and it is fires. Yeah.
So, I think that they will come up with a way to recover or deal with the loss the way we have through our generations.
Yes. And I do usually put my scripts just like everywhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a wonder it's not at Jason's house.
I have versions like on my computer and, just stuff. Just don't ask for them. Like in the middle of the night, hey, where's that script? With what you're talking about though, Joanna, with the, like the series and the Alexis and all that, just that mindset, as far as the nature of business and communication, are there ways that's being, utilized with the networking of the younger generation and all, where they get used to that, and where that will be either a road or a new path towards how that interaction keeps happening. It can be seem casual in that regard, but is it something that, if you're talking to Alexa saying, hey, contact so and so about this upcoming deal and where it's another mode of interaction for business, and whereas the older generation might not be crazy about that. It's just like someone who's used to it, who's used to navigating those worlds, is just like, oh, it's just second nature.
Yes, that's exactly it. And as you were talking, actually, and I don't know why, but what you were saying reminded me, do you all recall there was a movie back in 2013? I can't remember what it was called. It was something basic like Her or something, where a guy has a relationship, he falls in love with his iOS, right?
Yeah.
So that his girlfriend is Siri. It's the iOS in the phone, because the AI has gotten to the artificial intelligence has gotten to the extent where it can converse with us, and it becomes the perfect mate and all of this stuff. And I do think that I like to remind people that life is about change. And for a long time, it felt like that we were changing, but slowly. And if you think back to the baby boomers and the 1960s, the boomers are the hippies. They're the counterculture movement of the 60s and 70s were the boomers. And they set out to change business and change the world. And it is very similar to what's happening today with millennials and Gen Z, where they are going to make a drastic change to the world and to business. And they're doing it. The only difference between then and now is the technology, in my mind, and that the speed at which it happens, and the speed at which information travels, and the extent to which the scope with which we can all know the same information and interpret it for ourselves. And those interpretations are wildly different, but that it goes out. That is what's really sped up here, and why it feels like life is constantly moving. But what's happening, the change we're experiencing, is very normal. If you look back, I was just using this example with people the other day. We were talking about the frankly, the bastardization of language and of spelling and writing in particular. And that now, it used to be that if you wrote an email in all caps, you were yelling. Now there is a problem with using capital letters at all. They don't, like, the younger generations aren't using capital letters. They also aren't using periods. There's something, I mean, there's like a whole movement afoot. And I was on a panel with a group of people who were really bemoaning this shift. It was a lot of intellectuals, a lot of academics. And I reminded them, I said, have any of you read Shakespeare or Chaucer or Beowulf? And do you know, the language back then, and that was only a couple hundred years ago, the language back then is, in some cases, is unreadable to our version of English today. And yet that was English. And I promise you that in 300, 400, 500 years from now, they're not going to have any idea what we were saying in the 1980s or in the 1960s. That it will, you know, that that is a very normal shift to happen. It's just we get very myopic in our view. Again, we're programmed to be like that, and we're the amygdala, which is in the deep part of the brain, in a part of the brain called it's called the reptilian brain. It was formed when we were, you know, it's the oldest part of the brain. It was one of the first parts formed, and it's the survival mechanism. But it is trained, programmed to attract, to move towards what is familiar, similar, comfortable, and to reject that which is different, uncomfortable, not familiar. This is the whole system for why we like kind of push away change too.
Yeah, I think I'm in a perpetual change all the time, except for, you know, I always keep a stable base, but, you know, we know that I travel around quite a bit and have a lot of different clients, and it's wonderful. But the thing is that I was thinking too about when you were saying that, you know, the kids, when they were really young, you know, I had, and Jason remembers because he worked with her, we had this wonderful employee called Sharon, and she's deceased now, but she was our computer and artist. She was an artist, and she came over, I think Cheyenne was about 5, and she came over, and we had a whole room that was a computer. You know, nobody could, there was no dust allowed in that room. Because we had this, you know, sealed off room, couldn't have any carpeting in it. You know, it had to be on bare floor, and so it was on cement. And it was this whole, it was called Oscar. We had Oscar, the computer. Anyway, so, but Cheyenne, computers were starting to come in, and Cheyenne would, you know, help her figure out at 5 different codes to, you know, like stop things and to change things. And she would ask the little kids to help her get, and I was like, are we paying you a big salary? You know, to do this stuff, and you're asking the children, you know, and you can't hire the children because, for one, they're not reliable. For 2, they have to go to school, and for 3, you know, there are, you know, workers' laws. But it was like, oh my gosh, her asking the kids for codes. Yeah, it was hilarious.
You know,
Yeah,
an
and
interesting,
so they've all been, you know, born to be a part of that generation of, you know, some people complain about like the video games, but, you know, driving and anything, they have like these reactions that they can handle it. They can handle, you know, anything. Probably like, you know.
They can't just like blow up the cars in front of them, you know, on their steering wheel, even though they're imagining it, I'm sure.
Never know. Video games. Actually, when you were talking, it reminded me there's this practice in business. It was started like 25 years ago, but it's really used a lot more now, which is called reverse mentoring. And the whole point of reverse mentoring, especially because of these 5 generations in the workforce, is that you take a younger, you know, somebody who's younger in the organization and more entry level person, and you pair them up with an older worker, a baby boomer, silent generation type, usually more towards 60s, 70s years old. And the younger person teaches the older person about technology, how it works, how to use it, and also about youth culture. just what's hot right now and explains it and why not. And so what it does is it enables the older worker to remain relevant and up to date. And it helps the younger worker to feel integrated into the company. It helps them feel useful and relevant themselves. It's really a win-win. And a lot of companies use it these days for exactly what you were talking about, because it is amazing that when it's like language. I have a friend who was born in the United States, moved to France, got married in France, and had children there. Her husband used to speak only French to their children, and my girlfriend would speak only English. And what would happen was, by the time they were 2 and 3 and starting to and full sentences, was I'd be over, they would start talking to me in English, turn around and finish the sentence in French to dad. So, that automatic ability to process languages and to understand how language works in the brain is the same thing with computers. Kids are learning it so much earlier, that the swipe thing that they because they watch us do it. So the minute you put a phone or a computer or iPad or a tablet in their hand, they're doing this and they're hitting around, and they've internalized something that we're like, how do they know to do that?
Right. And they don't all have to take typing lessons like they used to. They can all type so fast. Yeah. We had to go to typing school.
I did too.
It was great. I'm so glad that I did,
I thought when I was in typing class, it's like, what am I going to use this for? And it's like, it was the greatest class I ever took.
Yeah. Besides math.
F, J, 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 F,
and
F,
English.
J, J, J.
Right. So, yeah. No, it is. It's fun to know those tools. Now, back to my mom,
Whose mom?
Your mom too. Anyway, our mom is she, as a RN and working in her 70s, she had to put she was administered all the medications, and so she'd have to take all the medications and administer it down into the computer of what she did. And they didn't write it on the chart. She had to do it into a computer. And so, she lacks some computer skills now, but she is on the internet. Our mom is completely on the internet all the time. And so, this is, it's great at her age. She fumbles around, but she masters it. I mean, because I fumble around, she only knew we all fumble around, it's just keep fumbling. Yeah. Until we get it.
I absolutely agree. I mean, the beauty about the human brain, and this is why I love neuroscience. I call myself a neuroscience nerd, and I bring it into all the business things that I do. But the beauty about the human brain is it has elasticity, right? And it's about, and they say, scientists have a saying, the neurons that fire together wire together, and elasticity and brain plasticity mean that exactly what it sounds like, that it can be shaped and molded throughout our lifetimes. I mean, there are certain processes that change. We all experience that, things get slower, they don't connect the same, memory, forgetfulness, all this kind of stuff, but that we can continually be learning, and that those synapses are still happening throughout our lifetime, and that you can learn things like computer. I have the exact same situation with my mother. She worked until she was 77, and then suddenly found herself at home with needing a laptop, a printer, a phone, all these kinds of things that she always had an IT department to deal with, and she knew her way around the computer in a basic way. And in the 2 years since she retired, I've gone over there, I've given her technology lessons, and I've taught her stuff, and she still is a little timid because it's not second nature to her, but she can do it and she can get around it. And actually, I said earlier, sports is 90% mental and 10% ability. Technology is the same thing. She has a mental block that she's not good at technology. Whereas if when she does sit down and fiddle with it, she figures it out.
That's really cool. It's just wonderful that she's doing it. She's just doing it because, we all have to kind of keep up with, until it's not there, we have to do it because, we don't want to be left in the dust. We don't. And a lot of people are left in the dust. They've decided to opt out. I hear people saying they're going to go off Facebook and they're going to go up, but it gives a presence. You're saying hello, you're socializing in a different way because this is a different time. Just keep going forward. You don't have to do it forever, but be good to yourself. It's all about being, nice to yourself.
I agree. And actually, you're talking earlier about meditation and teaching meditation. And when I give corporate talks and I do management training in companies and for organizations, it's not just corporations, by the way. I can go into a nonprofit, I can go into a trade group, like whoever. Mm-hmm. I talk a lot about meditation because it's really important, because it helps us observe the thinking. A lot of people think and they don't even really witness it. I say it's sort of like clouds in the sky, and you're the sky watching the clouds float by. The thoughts are the clouds, and a lot of people don't even have that that haven't even recognized that these thought things are just floating around all the time, and that meditation can really help with that. And I also talk about mantras, but I don't use I use the word mantra lightly, because sometimes in a corporate setting that can feel a little too woo spiritual. Yeah. And I try not to do that. I want to keep it business-like, but I know what I'm saying because I come from a background where I've used mantras and whatnot. So I'll occasionally call it a jingle, or whatever, but that you repeat these phrases as you would a mantra that help bring calm to the body, so that if you're in a meeting and you're in a stressful situation and you feel your kind of stress level rising, your heart palpitating, or maybe your fingers, you're getting cold or sweaty or whatever, that you can bring in the mantra, the jingle that brings the calm to the body and enables the brain to stay in that what's called executive functioning, where rational decision making. I point up here because this is where it lives. It lives in the prefrontal cortex, where that rational decision making, the self-control, that's where all of this lives, up here. And when we get stressed, this goes offline. It's like a computer that gets shut down. Speaking of getting lost and shut down. Right. So I do get in the business world, I get the meditation in there, kind of.
Do you put music to your jingle?
I know I should, though. That's good. That would be a good idea.
Stay calm, stay relaxed. Don't sweat out the big stuff.
I like it. It's very helpful.
Music can be very relaxing too.
Well, and music can also help you remember stuff. I mean, truly,
now I remember that, Jason.
I was joking the other day, but I know the alphabet backwards. Why do I know the alphabet backwards? Because some kid a friend of mine brought his kid to a football game. And what are you going to do for 3.5 hours at a college football game? And she and her class had made up a jingle to the alphabet backward. And so I've never forgotten that.
Which is handy if you're pulled over by the cops too. Like sing that.
But I don't drink, so hopefully I won't ever need it. But if I do, I can do it. I can still do it. That was decades ago.
Not if you're just drinking. If you're suspiciously driving, if you're like going to
right.
something.
Right.
If you're even driving at all, It's like
so now those mantras and everything. So what do you feel is the most important mantra that you say to someone now that, because they've been worried, you're in a place where they worry all the time about what's next,
I think it's very,
they're fearful. They're going into that flight or, fright.
Fight, flight, freeze. Yeah. What I tell everybody is it's very individualized, and I share some of the ones I use and some of the tactics I use, but it's so important that it's organic to you and to what you're understanding. So for example, for me, one of the things that I resist is there's certain, like, I'm really happy. If I'm happy, I'm good. And I'm okay, being, anger kind of has a strength to it. But if there's any panic or anxiety involved, I don't like that feeling. Like, I don't want to have that emotion. And I came up with all kinds of tactics for dealing with anxiety. And the truth is, none of them worked. And none of the tools where I tried to push down the anxiety worked because I wasn't processing the anxiety. And what I realized was I really needed to switch around my perception. And so I developed a saying, I wouldn't know that I call it a mantra, but the saying is, I'm enjoying the roller coaster ride of life. And for me, what that means is life has ups and downs. It's supposed to be that way. I don't get some spiritual bypass. Like I don't get some pass from having feelings or from having life happen. There is no perfect. That, you know, that the roller coaster is the way life is, that I am on the roller coaster just like every other human being. And the truth is that when I'm actually riding a roller coaster at an amusement park, the up is the scariest part because of the anticipation of what's going to happen here. The down is fun. It's like where I'm like, woo, this is great, you know. And the dip is where it's the most calm. Now, isn't that ironic? Because in my mind, I think that going up, meaning going up in my career, having positive things happen, I point upward. I think that's up. Mm-hmm. And I think down is negative. I think down means, oh, I'm something bad is happening in my career. I'm being kicked out of my career. Something's going down. And when I'm at the very bottom, I'm the most anxious because I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to have money? Am I going to have a job? Am I going to have whatever? It's that pivoting, that pivot we all go through in life multiple times. And what if I were to change my perception to be more like the roller coaster? The up is kind of scary because I know at some point there's going to be a dip because that's life. The dip is kind of the fun part because it's like, okay, there was the zenith. Now I'm heading down. I know how to do down. I know how to pivot. I'm at the bottom. I'm in the calm part where I can like actually reorganize and restructure my pivot so that I can then head back up and get anxious again. But anyway, so that one works for me. That's not going to work for everybody. You know, that's not an example that everybody can grok, can really get a hold of. But I tell people, you know, whatever works for them. Something, you know, someone who's religious might really appreciate let go, let God. You know, that one is a very alliterative saying that someone who believes in God and has religion, that will work for them. Other ones are, you know, things like as someone who has perspective and with 20/20 hindsight and knows like, well, things always work out. That actually might be a good mantra for them. It's okay. It'll all work out. You know, so.
For me, I always say that there are no accidents. You were born to experience this time in history, you know, and, you know, you're born brave and you can rock anything, you know, we can handle it. You just handle it day by day. You don't project forward. You just are daily doing the best you can. And that's what we do anyway. You know, the future is unknown. We have choices. So how are you going to choose? Every day, you're going to choose to do the great thing for your life, not stumble. You know how to, you know, we all know how to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and keep going. Yeah.
You remind me of a great saying. Anais Nin, she was French, and I believe she was like one of Picasso's mistresses, I think. She had a terrific saying that I use a lot. Human beings can handle absolutely anything in the moment. That's another good one.
In the moment. Yeah, she was great. She had a lot of really good anecdotes. Yeah, she was great. Yeah. Yeah, fun. So now, do you take private clients?
I work primarily with corporations, but I do see private clients because I have a PhD in psychology, but I don't practice. I'm not licensed as a therapist. I didn't get it for that reason. I use it in business, but I often do panels, speech talks, whatever. And a lot of times someone will come to me afterward. They'll get me on LinkedIn or they'll come through my website through my company's website. And they'll say, would you talk to me? And so I developed because it's more like coaching, it's like personal coaching. But what I do is I developed an individual rate that is pretty low by coaching standards, quite frankly. And I sit on the phone, I listen to them, I talk to, I hear their story and what's going on for them. And then I offer interventions, which is it's a therapeutic term, but I offer solution, let's put it that way. I give them homework and I make suggestions for things they can read. It's not a formal coaching session. I'm not, do this, and then call me back and we're going to do 3 sessions. And, that has a place, but it's not what I'm doing. I'm literally just, trying to give back while also respecting my own time and my own, need to earn. And a couple of times people will say, this has been great. This is exactly what I needed. And I never hear from them again. Other times people will come back maybe to talk once or twice. And then in other cases, I have women that I ended up mentoring, not in a coaching, they're paying me kind of way, but I still mentor them 10 years later.
Nice. So where can they find you? What is your website that's easiest for them to find you?
Thanks. So the company is D Massey Associates, and so the website is the initials JDMA Inc. INCs, because it's D Massey Associates Incorporated. So JDMA Inc. And they can find me there. You can also just Google my name and my website will pretty much come up, and as will my LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So, and I'm open to people message me and I respond. So that's another good way if that's more comfortable, either way.
Right. And then to get your books, we know that you can get them on Amazon, but can they get them from you too if they wanted a signed copy?
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, because of COVID at this point, I don't have, I haven't been doing that many signed copies. And I only have a few of the 2 books. I only have a couple with me. I mean, I still have a few that they could buy from me and I could ship off to them. But yeah, Amazon or Barnes & Noble are the best to go to my author page. And that's the quickest way, because you can get it in ebook or you can get it in paperback. They were in stores, but Culture Shock released in May, which was like in the height of COVID. So the books got shipped to stores, but the stores weren't open and no one was going to them. And so, and I don't know if you know much about the book situation, but the stores only keep them for 3 to 6 months and then they have to go back. So,
Timing is a thing.
But it's great. It's great to do books. I want books to live, talking about, like my generation too. The 18-year-olds.
Yeah, the actual paper.
Have books. Yeah, even though they're heavy to move, and and how many book boxes do I have? I had somebody help me move a couple years ago, and it was so funny. He said, the guys who were helping me said, "Why are you here, Jack? What made you decide to help Tara?" And Jack, who's from San Francisco, said, he goes, my spirit guides told me to come help her. And it was so funny because it was like, do you like your spirit guides now? As they're moving my boxes of books.
Thanks, spirit guides.
Because I have books, and they're heavy. They are heavy, but I wouldn't give them up for anything. I love my books. Yeah, and have quite an extensive library of.
What is your website, Tara?
TaraInsight.com. So TaraInsight.com. And I'm going to put some seminars out there. We're going to try those in 2021 and let's see if we can rock it and go forward. Okay, everybody, Sedona, Los Angeles, wherever I decide to go. Yeah. How about you, Jace? What are you doing?
I too am a JDM, but my website is Jason D McKean, JSONDMCKEAN.com. And I have my Om chant albums there available. Usually it just sends you off to Amazon or iTunes or one of these places. And then my tarot reading schedule is up there as well. Classes. All these good offerings.
Yes. So we're going to have a solar eclipse on Monday, and I'll write about it because it is a total solar eclipse. Is at 23 degrees Sagittarius. It's going to be quite nice because, we have our Saturn and Jupiter coming together on December 21st to create that beautiful, amazing star that we're going to see over Christmas. And that's going to be, and it hasn't happened since the year 1240. So it's going to be a really magnificent phenomenon in the sky. And everybody, this eclipse, anyway, solar eclipses are something is coming to you that's a gift. And so it's a rebirth of some kind because it's at 23 degrees Sagittarius. Anyway, so.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Lots of love, everybody.
That's great.
Thank you, Dr. Joanna.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For being on the
Thank you.
show. Okay. Bye, everybody. Lots of love.
Thank you for listening to Transformations with Tara. Tara hopes this program brings guidance and insight towards a better tomorrow. If you have any questions or inquiries, or would just like to know more about Tara Sutphen's workshops and seminars or private sessions, please visit her website now at tarainsight.com. Until next time, many blessings.